All right, here we go. We're good to go. It is February 9. I almost said February 8, but it's February 9, 2024. Here at Common Sense Ohio, week in and week out, bringing you your dose of common sense. We're brought to you by Harper Plus Accounting, where they not only will do your tax returns, but they'll make sure that your tax returns are correct. And how do they do that? It's planning, folks. It's planning. It means they meet with you. That means they help you establish what you need to do day in and day out, week in and week out, quarter in and quarter out, month in and I should have said month before quarters. Anyway, it's Harper Plus Accounting, bringing you the show every week. And we've got Glenn Harper here at the table, boys.
What's up, fellas?
Holy mackerel. That's coffee talking. He brought coffee, so I'm talking really fast right now because I'm juiced up.
Is there any other way?
Yeah. Yeah, but so a couple things about the show. You can check us out at commonsenseohioshow.com, where the backlog of episodes resides. If you missed one, don't worry. Go there, check it out. If you need to subscribe, you can do that there, too. It'll take you right. Everybody says, how do you hear a podcast? I still got people ask me that stuff. I was like, it's easy. Go to commonsenseohioshow.com, click subscribe, and it'll take you right where you need to go. We are now on video, so those who are watching, spanning the globe on video, hello. And I guess we're good to go. Norm missed last week, so we're going to jump in, but I do have a World War II fact of the day that I always do, Glenn. It's always a World War II fact of the week, I suppose. February 9th in 1942, we started daylight savings. How about that?
Stop.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it was a wartime deal.
What was the purpose behind it?
I guess to give us to
get the factory workers to work sooner.
Got an extra hour daily?
It's farming. It's all about light.
They borrowed from the future to give us today.
It's about
light. Have to go back.
Light in the morning, pre GPS controlled tractors.
Daylight savings time required that the clocks be moved ahead 1 hour for the remainder of the war as a national defense measure to conserve energy.
There you go.
Says the.
And we move clocks back on this date.
It's when it started.
Oh, gotcha. But okay, gotcha. Okay.
So that's the first. The second thing that happened on this day is in 1943. We took Guadalcanal. So the Solomon Islands campaign, we finally took Guadalcanal. And that was interesting because, the Japanese until then, we sort of stalemated, I guess, Norm and Coral Sea, and then we beat them in Midway and sort of stopped their advance. And now we decided that we're going to advance. And there was a little bit of politics going on because everybody in the world was saying Germany first. They wanted us to go over and fight in the continent before we advanced in the Pacific. So there was a little bit of a political maneuver, and I guess I think it was a guy named Admiral King, I forget who it was, but who pursued the campaign in the Solomons. He sort of had tacit approval to go do it, and he did it. So
we're in the march for take over all the islands. Where was Guadalcanal in that? Is that the first third, the first half, the final one?
It's the first third.
That was the first step?
So there is a monument, and the only monument to our fighting men in Guadalcanal was erected by the people of New Zealand, because the Guadalcanal and that area that you're talking about, Glenn, was the launching off point, people assumed, for attacking Australia and New Zealand. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was very close, and we lost a lot of guys at Guadalcanal. You remember that, what's it called? Green Acres. Mm-hmm. Eddie Albert.
Yep.
So
Green Acres.
FFA member.
He was a coxswain in the Navy at Guadalcanal, and he always kind of downplayed his role. But the Marines at one point on one bit of the beach were basically being fought right back into the sea, literally. Like they're in water, and the Japanese are just taking their heads off. And nobody would go in. Eddie Albert went in and relieved those Marines, got them on board the LST or whatever the hell, those Higgins boats or whatever, and got them off that tip of beach, and then, reinserted them in a... To say it's a safer place is a joke, because that was the first time that our propaganda machine was showing Marines floating in the in the water at the beach, upside down, bloated bodies, and it really blew people away back in America about, hey, this is a real war. Like, this isn't like, when Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah, or the Yanks are coming and all that bullshit. This is real shit.
Pretty real stuff. And then the campaign, just to put in perspective, started in August of 42. I think August 8. I looked it up, and it was August 8. So they finally captured Guadalcanal in February 43.
It was
so, and so they chose, like, that was the the biggest stronghold that was at the very bottom, and then they south, and they just kept going up.
Well, the idea
north, right?
The idea is the Solomons were, as Norm said, the Japanese were sort of creating outposts there so they could eventually attack Australia or even our west coast. I mean, they were sort of working their way. Now we stopped them at Midway right before that, and before Midway we stopped. It was sort of a stalemate at Coral Sea. The difference though is I think we had the boats we could stalemate with the Japanese at Coral Sea and still be okay. Mm-hmm. They started losing their ships, and it's like, they at Midway they lost I don't know how many carriers, but it was not good.
Yeah,
and so that gave us sort of a foothold to go on the advance. But again, we put that Pacific off until after the continent. We had D-Day in 44 of June, or June of 44, and then eventually it was only Japan. So
yeah, the book to read is written by Richard Tregakis. It's called Guadalcanal Diary. And he was a combat Marine there. And it was written immediately after the war. And that is kind of like
I've never read it.
That's the definitive book about Guadalcanal from a grunt's point of view.
Yeah.
Which
is the great, that's the best history of World War II.
That's the best perspective.
It's from his perspective, very limited scope. But then he talks about the overall thing, but it's not like from a scholar's perspective.
Yep.
It's a grunt perspective.
In school, in high school, college, nobody really talked about the Pacific campaign. It was all the European campaign.
Yes,
so all these things you learn now, I've learned all this way after the fact on my own.
We didn't even there was not a huge unit, because that's what we used to call them in like 9th and 10th grade history. Not a whole lot at all on World War II back in those days, for us anyway.
Yeah,
no, it just didn't happen.
Yeah.
I got interested later, but Norm's favorite battle. We missed you last week, Norm. The end of Stalingrad, I think, was February 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's when they surrendered.
Right. So you brought up Green Acres as trivia.
As the place to be.
Two more trivia. Yeah, two more trivia. This just popped up somewhere this weekend. I got to text myself this. So
New York is where I'd rather be.
Did you know that Bob Crane of Hogan's Heroes played the drum solo at the beginning of that song?
Wow, cool.
I had no idea.
The beginning of Green Acres?
Of Hogan's Heroes.
Oh, Hogan's Heroes, okay.
Yeah, the drum solo. Yeah. And the jacket he wore was the same jacket Frank Sinatra wore in Von Ryan's Express.
Really? Bob Crane, Hogan's jacket was Von Ryan's Express jacket.
It was a great show.
On the hanger at the studio.
Which I could believe. Because that's
you want to see you want to go read some weird Hollywood criminal history. Go read about Bob Crane and his murder. Just bizarre stuff.
Yeah, but I didn't know that about the drum solo that he played at the beginning. So it's just the snare.
I love Hogan's Heroes.
I know.
Yeah, Eddie Albert was an FFA member, Future Farm of America, which is crazy.
Yeah, it is.
He was our poster child when I was doing that in high school. He was the most famous guy to go through it. It was crazy.
Right. So can you see him in a Higgins boat or whatever he had? Going in.
This is just it, though. This is
these guys were quiet. This is
why we won the war. Yeah. It was the American sort of ingenuity.
Right.
And this is not me. Stephen Ambrose used to tout this. He would say, the Americans would go in and solve problems. We had the authority at the individual level to solve problems. And that meant these boys that came from the farms that were used to welding stuff, used to fixing stuff, used to just we got to do
that.
This,
was one of his major.
And,
he would point that out a lot in his books.
And I think he pointed out mostly, or at least in large part, because the Nazis were the exact opposite. They were up and down the line, regimented. If you wanted to do something, you had to have permission to do it. They did not have authority to act on their own in any way, at any level. Up and
I'm going to
down.
go one further, Steve. So you see the front cover here of my pocket Constitution.
Yep.
And what do you got here? You got 3 rebels, right? And I think part of that is the inbred independence, or if you will, just willing to be disobedient in the American
culture,
in the American character. It's like, hey, that's why they were finding Japanese soldiers still on some of these islands
20 years later
into the 80s.
Yeah,
right?
Crazy.
Is because they would not. And again, I think this is a national character thing.
Yeah, no surrender.
They would not disobey like Americans. Americans, after 3 or 4 months of no planes flying over and no bombs going off, a guy would wander out to the beach and start waving a white, sheet.
Right.
Hey, is this thing over or what's going? But not the Japanese, man. Their character is, hey, for the emperor, I'm staying in the jungle. I'm holding on to my Arisaka rifle, and I'm ready.
So remember, Americans, we are loyal to an idea, and everybody else was loyal to some figurehead who's telling them what to do.
Right.
And that's you
That's
can't
a
compete
really
with
good
that.
point.
That's a big-
Which is relevant to what we're going to talk about a little bit today, because the idea of worshiping your leader is not ingrained in our souls.
Not a bit.
And I hear people, when I was in England, I spent a summer in England way back in college, and then I talked to various people. There was a British guy who was a conservative guy, but he was up last summer, and I spent, a couple hours just BSing with him up in my office. He was a lawyer, a barrister, who was visiting. But he understood what I told him, which is, I hear these Brits say, well, we don't have gun control, or we have gun control over here, and everything's fine. We don't have this, we don't have that. And my answer is always the same. It's like, we left. Yeah, we left.
There's a reason.
Yeah, we don't worship the crown. We don't. I mean, to us, that's so abhorrently stupid. We don't do that here.
Leave me alone.
We don't want people telling us what to do.
Right.
And we don't like the authoritarian boot of like Biden right now,
Right.
and all his executive action. And
All these people, mainly, I hate to, I sound like a progressive hater, and I don't hate anybody, but the progressives and liberals a lot of times want to exalt the European countries and how they operate.
Yeah.
Many of them are monarchies. Many of them have official state religions that tax dollars go to.
And they're
it's
socialist.
It's insane.
It's like, no, I don't want that. We left. We don't want that here.
Right.
We don't
right,
want the
right.
people that you saw in the cover. They didn't want that. They're
No,
rebels. They said no.
That's right.
No, thank you. I'm going to go farm. I'm going to go kill my own food. I'm
The
gonna grow my
cult
own
of
food.
George III.
Bye-bye.
No, thank you. We're done.
I get my authority from a higher power, not from some dude or dudettes that's telling me
That's
what
right.
to do.
That's right.
This ain't
So
gonna happen.
which is
The
interesting.
natural rights of man, God-given rights.
God-given rights, yeah.
The Constitution did not give us the right of free speech. It guarantees the right of free speech, but it doesn't give it. Those were pre-existing rights from God.
Well,
that's the American philosophy.
And this goes back to and then I probably get too deep into this, but there's two philosophers sort of that came along. One is a guy named Thomas Hobbes, and the other guy is John Locke. Hobbes would say that the natural state of man is chaos, and they kill each other, and it just degrades, whatever it would be, into war and whatever. Therefore, we need to sort of pledge power to an authoritarian government to keep us all in check. Locke took the exact same set of facts and says, therefore, we don't need a government power to keep us all in check. And it's like the two differences. We adopted the Lockean view, which is like, look, we engage in agreement, mutual respect, contracts with each other. And Locke would say, look, I mean, if it's true what Hobbes said, we'd all be dead. It's like 'cause we kill each other. But no, we have learned to live in harmony. And it's because we
choose a leader. We choose a leader. Even the Vikings chose their leaders.
Yeah.
It wasn't like
and limit the power.
That's right. That's
and
right.
We created a limited leader only to do the things that our natural competition in life would not take care of on its own.
That's right.
And it's sort of a fascinating philosophical approach that I think Americans uniquely have on the world.
Well, it's a lot of based in Christianity too.
Very based in Christianity.
We're
all God's children. Right?
Paul writes to the Romans saying, God's the dude.
Yeah.
That's it. I
As
mean,
Winston would say, if we don't have rules, we're just like the animals, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Winnie the Pooh. Now there's a rich source for
No,
quotes,
Winston.
Steve.
Winston from the Keanu Reeves movies.
You know it. You'll
Yeah.
figure it out. You're Mr. Movie. You'll pop in your head. I forget.
Where he's the killer.
When he's
John Wick.
John
Yeah,
Wick.
Wick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
John
Oh,
Wick.
that.
So
Yeah.
the only way everybody has to agree to a set of rules, and then somebody's going to kind of like mediate that or whatever. And if we don't have rules, then we will be what we were for thousands of years, just killing
But
everybody
we
random.
don't need the authoritarian individual to cram down the rules. We can contract and negotiate amongst ourselves.
We agree to the rules.
How we want to operate in life.
And we really have lost the thread in America.
We've lost that.
We've lost
we
that
depend
thread.
upon the almighty big brother now.
Right.
It's like we don't need that, right?
Right.
We function without it just fine.
Every personal problem or family issue or behavioral trait,
Big brother
people
will fix it.
expect, the government to tuck them in at night and kiss them
I need them to tell me what bathroom to use, to be all honest. I just never know which one to go in anymore. It's very important. But meanwhile, we got people dying on the beach, but we're more concerned about what bathroom to use. I mean, it's a good use of resources.
Yeah. As I tell my youngest son, actually both sons often, the hardest place to look for any solution to any problem is the mirror. It's like, but it's almost always the right place to look.
That's the right place to look, though.
And it's where you can take direct action for immediate results.
You get the funhouse mirror, then you can be real skinny if you want to look at it the right lens.
Put the crack pipe down. For God's sakes, put the crack pipe down.
Yeah, that's a good start.
Yeah, that's a good start.
It's a real good start.
And I wish they'd do that in D.C.,
right.
Because the things are out of control. I mean,
Well, speaking of D.C., we might as well jump into it. There was a U.S. Supreme Court argument yesterday on whether Donald Trump can be on the ballot in Colorado. So I think we've all made our predictions here. We don't need to go into it. I didn't listen to it. I had a couple people text me. It's like, did you listen to the argument? I was like, I didn't want to appear like I was too stupid, so I had to Google it, U.S. Supreme Court argument. And it was the Trump argument. I didn't even know it was happening.
It was 2 hours. I mean, it was a lot of discussion. Mm-hmm. So,
and I hear that sort of both sides of the court, you've got the two, sort of the liberals and then the conservatives, for lack of a better way to put it. I heard they both were sort of like,
come on,
very skeptical about Colorado trying to keep Trump off the ballot.
Yeah, using a Civil War, amendment.
Yeah,
that was directed towards officers of the Confederacy. I mean, that's the original intent, and I don't think that you can twist that. And even Kagan, who a liberal appointee to the Supreme Court, she was clearly thinking that there was no substance to the argument.
So what if you just hand wrote somebody's name on a ballot? If they don't put it official in there, aren't you always allowed to handwrite somebody on there?
Well, I think it's an interesting question. I think each individual state has the authority to create their election process, and there are write-in candidates often. I would wonder how that would work in Colorado if Trump were not on the ballot. I mean, first of all, it doesn't really matter. He's not winning Colorado anyway, so it's like somewhat irrelevant. But it's very relevant, I suppose, for precedential purpose. But I don't know what would happen in Colorado if he weren't on the ballot, how many write-ins he would get.
Because Mickey Mouse gets a lot of them on write-in ballots. You hear about that on the news all the time. Like, oh, Mickey Mouse is running.
I got some votes was it for governor?
No kidding. You got written in?
Oh, yeah.
I voted.
At least 2.
I voted for you.
Yeah,
I did too.
I mean, I
mentioned that on the show.
Who was your running mate? Who was your lieutenant governor?
I had to pick him on the fly.
That would have been
you. We would have trusted you. Fiscal guy to keep the.
We'd have trusted you. Yeah.
So I think this is a good segue into what you do, Glenn. I think that if I had the control of Ohio, I would probably call you up and say, can we whip this state into shape financially speaking? And I'll bet you we could do it in about a year.
If we could get rid of 98.3% of the bureaucracy and the special interest of this code, that code, and just say, look, here's what you pay on, and trying to do for other clients in other states, everybody has a separate set of rules. Everything is taxed different. You try to find out something's sales tax in Ohio, it's impossible. You have to call them. They try to cite the code. You get the paperwork. You look at it. Then you got to make an interpretation. Is that really what they're trying to say? Then you got to make an assessment and go with it. But they always have the authority to come back because they know that's not what it really says. So how do you navigate it? If you just make it simple, like everything is just 1%.
Yeah. All right. So you have
everything you sell is 1%. Everybody pays X up to a high amount on your real estate tax. That's it. Like it says $1 million house or a trailer, you pay X up to a cap, and that's it. And then it's real easy. And whatever you make in income, this is your percent. Just flat it out. It takes a lot of people like me out of a job. Hallelujah. I'd rather do something else, right? But that
but it demystifies for Joe Sixpack to understand really. We probably would still use someone like you, but at least we go in knowing a little bit more knowledgeable and a little more power to us.
It's not fair because the average person, they go into selling some e-commerce online and they're going to sell to 30 counties in Ohio and in 7 states, perhaps. How do they know? How do you set up sales tax and all? How many counties are in the U.S.? 2,000 and some, whatever. How do you know the different codes, the different rates? How do you go file it? How do you pick it up? Like, why? Why has it got to be like? Why has it got to be so hard? So Amazon has got an army of CPAs and attorneys figuring that out, and they get billions put toward it. Sally working out of her house wants to go sell some soap to 10 different counties, 3 different states. She's got to do the same thing Amazon has to do. Just more commas, but the same concept to set up, execute, pay. And if you don't do it, they come at you the same way. It's just not fair.
Well, think about the bureaucracy, though. You mentioned it. You mentioned bureaucracy, and I think there's a lot to be said about this. So if you have it so complicated that we have to request all these dollars from our citizens, but then I wonder how much of it is self-serving, because what does the bureaucracy cost? How many people are we employing in the state of Ohio that their only job is to figure out who has to pay what and then send out notices for how much you have to pay? And if you just cut that out of the budget, like how much less could you collect in tax? It's like it's this Leviathan, to go back to Hobbes. It's this Leviathan that keeps growing and growing and growing.
City tax in Ohio there's only a few states that will have local tax, but city tax in Ohio, however many municipalities we have, hundreds, each city has to have their own tax department to not only collect, levy, enforce, and do what has to be done. So there's a person at every single city.
Yeah, Rita.
Well,
Rita's her name, right?
Rita. She's Regional Income Tax Authority. She oversees, say, 200 cities.
Plus the school districts.
Well, that's something different.
Yeah.
So this is just city.
Well, their income tax.
Okay. So these municipalities will partner with Rita, so Rita has the infrastructure to help the collective do it.
Right.
But there's still, we call them generic cities, that they do it on their own. City of Dublin, they do their own income tax department.
Yeah.
They don't partner with anybody. Columbus manages a couple, but CCA manages a couple. So if you don't have the top 5 groups that hold it, the rest of people, it's just there's an individual department. Well, you got to pay somebody, 2 or 3 people, 50, 80 grand a year, have an office space for a municipality in Mechanicsburg or where pick a city like who needs to spend that kind of money?
Right.
So scale that up at every level, all the way up to the top.
That's what I'm saying. Ohio allows school districts to put income taxes on the ballot, and many districts, the voters have approved it. So then in addition to your city income tax, you have a school income tax, and it's just another layer of confusion for the average
and then
person.
How many people, like if you got rid of all the people that we employ in order to figure all this out, how much money would you save? And you probably don't need the tax in the first place if you got rid of half of them.
So Ohio is trying to a few years ago, they implemented where you can pay the CRISP system. You could pay your city taxes via the state of Ohio, but you have to set up, and if you don't do it right, you get penalized. And it's just a fundamental shift of paying a city or paying the regional income tax authority. Now you got to pay the state. They take a cut, then they give it back to whoever it needs to go to. Why is it going to be so hard?
Filtering money through how many positions that don't need to exist?
Why does government make it so complicated?
And then you get treated.
I don't understand it.
I think you answered your question. It's government.
So
they want to do
you
that.
get treated differently too, depending on. Like take the situation of Columbus. Columbus has an income tax. So if you're a plumber that lives in Gahanna, right? You don't live in Columbus, but you're driving into Columbus to do a job in Columbus, okay? Then they've got to figure out, so Gahanna's also got an income tax. So then you've got to figure out how to apportion that guy's time. He's running around in the van going to Reynoldsburg and then Westerville, and he's, how is he really supposed to comply with the law, because he's doing jobs in these different municipalities, but yet he lives at home?
Do you want the real answer for that, how you do it?
It's a mess.
So, where the income is earned gets the tax first. Then where you reside, if you will pay the delta. So if you work in a city that's at 2% and you live in a city that's 2.5%, you pay the delta. Or the city where you reside may not give you full credit. They only say, well, you worked at 2%, we'll only give you a 1% credit. So you got to still pay the other 1.5% for where you live. So now you're paying 2 plus 1. You're paying 3.5% to the city now. Then you add on your state and your fed. So
it's insane.
It's really hard.
So I know a little bit about the interstate commerce, trucking and busing industry. There's a tax overseeing agency called IFTA, okay, at the federal level. And
if the bus comes, you got to pay.
So what they do is they apportion by mileage, right? If you're doing, let's say, a coast to coast run in a yellow freight truck, well, they're out of business now, but whatever. Another trucking company, and you're going through 13 different states. each of those states wants their portion of the diesel tax, right, for rolling through their state.
Whether you bought it there or not.
Yeah, so they have all this GPS crap and logbooks and all this stuff, and it all goes to this agency in D.C. that then redistributes the tax, the fuel taxes back to those states.
So this is
in proportion.
This is relevant for what's going
insane.
on, because when you cram down that kind of regulatory scheme, you essentially eliminate the owner operators, because it becomes too difficult, too burdensome to meet the regulatory scheme. This is very similar to gun control. So it's like they think, all right,
and you create a black market, Steve.
And you create a black market
because
cheat.
Then there's truckers who just say, I'm not going to get any authority from anybody. I'm just going to roll.
I'm going to run it. Right.
I'm going to run it.
And so like people always wonder now, or people are bitching now about how much their goods and services are costing. And they're like, well, these businesses, they're just taking advantage of us. Except the businesses can't find the labor. I was just talking to a very good friend, Glenn. He's your client too. I'm not going to mention his name, but he runs a business, and he can't find any labor. And he's offering real money, but he can't find any labor.
Yeah.
Now, eventually, he's going to have to offer enough to find the labor, and then that's going to impede upon his bottom line so much that he's going to have to raise his prices. So that's just one way this happens. Now, if you had to have labor to meet like these regulatory demands, scale that up. Right. Like that's why that's why everything is costing more, is because of this.
And also destroys opportunities, for the customer.
It destroys opportunity for the entry level position. So our kids aren't getting entry level positions, and therefore they can't advance. So if you want to really tamp down minorities and prevent them from advancing and making money in the world, then raise the minimum wage high enough and the cost of work high enough where nobody's going to hire them.
So you guys have probably heard in Pennsylvania of Hershey, Carlisle, these big, huge swap meets that they have for gearheads, right? And they'll have a Corvette one and a Mustang one and whatever, Mopar one. And I used to go, probably for 15 or 20 years, I would go to the Ford one at Carlisle. And what the state of Pennsylvania would do is they actually had inspectors going from, now we're talking about guys that take an old intake, manifold, put it on the table and a couple of wheels and a car horn, and like they're just cleaning out their garage, right, or whatever.
Yeah.
The state of Pennsylvania is going from table to table to find out if you're registered to pay their income tax, right, for sales that you're making.
Because they don't have sales tax.
No, they do have sales tax, and they want your sales tax.
I thought Pennsylvania did not have sales tax.
Yeah, go ahead.
They do, and they didn't. They used to not have a city tax, but they have what's called a borough tax. They put in about 7 years ago or so, which is the same as our city tax, but it's even more convoluted than the Ohio. So it's a cluster.
So what what I did, Steve, I would put out all my stuff on the table, and I told the guys from Pennsylvania, the state guys, I'm not selling anything here. These are all samples, right? And then my customers, when I go back to Ohio, right, they know what I have,
and
I'll ship it from Ohio. So you're getting Pennsylvania, you're getting screwed out of money. Like
if you just made it easy.
If you made it easy, right?
Yeah.
But you want me to file an income tax return and pay state sales tax. There's no way I'm going to add those layers of complication to my life.
Lunacy.
So you're just screwing the local people that would normally say, "Oh, I like that wheel. Here's $20 for that wheel." You're shafting your own people.
So here's the kicker with that: they don't. The tax. It's not a. You're the fiduciary. You're supposed to collect it and pay it. So it doesn't cost you anything. Whether you sell in state or out of state, wherever the end customer is, you have to withhold the tax or charge it.
Exactly.
And if you don't,
like Amazon,
they will come back to you and make you pay it, even though you didn't collect it.
Right.
So you're on you whether you sell it there or somewhere else, you're supposed to file it. Who can do that? It's impossible.
It's impossible.
But
if you don't, they will come in and shut you down. They'll make you pay.
Well, and we're seeing the same. So how does this relate, Glenn, to sort of the gig economy? You see these like the Uber drivers and Lyft drivers. California was trying to make them W-2s and not 1099s, and it all has the same practical effect.
Yeah.
It puts them out of business, or it drives the collection process underground.
Yeah.
So remember, the whole point of going from everybody used to be self-employed back in the day, and then you would have to pay your quarterly taxes every quarter. That's how it was. Well, the government realized that people weren't doing that because it was hard to do. So I believe it would have been, who's our guy? Roosevelt basically said, FDR said, hey, we're going to make the Department of Labor, everybody has to be an employee. And if you do that, then you put the onus of collecting the tax for the withholding on your paycheck to the employer, because you can enforce that, because that's the one-to-many. Yeah. So now everybody became an employee. Well, they keep moving that way because that's how you get your self-employment tax. You get your Medicare tax. Yes. You get all those things, the unemployment.
Well, and not only that, it has this other impact that the populace doesn't know how much they're paying in tax.
Correct. So as California goes the other way with that, their whole point is to put the power to the employee and be able to make the employer enforce whatever directive that is. Whereas if you're just an independent contractor, you're kind of freewheeling, doing what you do. You still report your income, do what you do, but you're not beholden to anybody. You just report your things. But they want somebody to tell you what to do. It's all about the control and reporting it. And again, if you're trying to go out there, hustle a side gig, and this is the platform you have everywhere in this country, you can be an independent contractor on Uber, but all of a sudden California, you're an employee. Well, those people they don't want to do that. That's not built, that cost is not built into the fee.
So they're going to lose Uber and Lyft, and they're going to get the taxi cabs back. That's what
they want.
Yeah. All right.
Anyway, what else you got there, Norm? I know you're chomping at the bit to get through the paper chase here.
Well, not really. I mean, there's just been so much. Let's cover some Ohio stuff. I mean, the national stuff we're all getting anyway. But since we were talking about taxation, a group of Ohio House members and senators are putting together a bill to phase out the state income tax. And, the bill hasn't, to my knowledge, I didn't check in the last couple days, it hasn't been introduced yet. But the idea would be to reduce the state income tax in phases, to bring it down to maybe half of what it is the first couple of years, and then eventually get it down to zero.
Well, Glenn, what say you to that?
So they did this way back, I think it was 03, whenever they put in the commercial activity tax.
The CAT tax, I remember that.
And basically it said, we're going to stop corporations from paying tax, and we're not going to make you pay tax on your personal property, inventory, tables, anything tangible. And for that, we're going to then charge everybody a tax on their gross revenue. And if you gross revenue is less than 150,000, you pay nothing. And if you make a revenue of 150,000 to $1 million, you would pay $150, just flat fee. Mm-hmm. Well, that's all fine and dandy.
And that's everybody, right? Everybody with an LLC, with a corporation.
Anybody who does business, commercial activity, that's what you pay. Well, that turned out to be a pretty good deal for them, and now they're modifying where the new threshold is $3 million starting next year. So a lot of people won't have to file this thing. But all it did is that made the people that have the money, they weren't paying this one tax, but they're turning around and paying this other tax. So all it is a bait and switch.
It's a shell game.
Well, yeah, because they're saying there's going to be a $20 billion hole in the budget. Well, obviously they're going to make it up somewhere. If there truly is a $20 billion hole by doing this, it's got to come somewhere else.
If we could be like Florida and we could add some, beaches and some amusement parks and things that people would want to come to Ohio, we can make the tourists pay for it. But we don't have that.
We've got the studio,
which is a big deal,
right?
So, but the challenge is it's what everybody keeps forgetting about all these discussions. It's not a tax problem; it's a spending problem.
Right.
If we figure out what we actually want to,
this is where you and I are going to take over. We're going to create a budget. And it's really sort of easy. We do this personally. Like, I know how much money I have coming in every month, and then I know how much money I need to spend every month. And guess what? I usually end up ahead on my end because I like to save money. Now,
it's crazy talk.
Imagine if the government did that.
So let me answer Brett's point. So Brett brought up that is the answer you would hear from somebody who operates with a zero-based budget, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where's the other $20 billion going to come from? Here's the effing answer, people. When you lower the taxes, it's like the Field of Dreams. People will come. That's the philosophy. Mm-hmm. So you get rid of the income tax, but your Intels, your GMs, your Hondas, your BMWs, your Boeings, all of a sudden your state is much more attractive for people to come in, to move here, not just for tourism, but to actually
fair enough.
relocate.
And then,
Because what is Uncle Norm thinking now that I'm getting a little older? I'm going to pull the ripcord at some point, like Sean Hannity just moved to Florida, like Rush Limbaugh moved to Florida, like a lot of people in New York State moved to Florida. At some point, you're like, well, why am I paying all this money when I could go to Tennessee, Florida, Texas, Arizona? I forget one of the Montanas maybe, but there's
only one Montana.
There's like
Wyoming.
Dakota.
Dakota.
There's
Wyoming.
like 6 or 7 states that have no income tax, right? Screw it. Like I'm gone, man.
But here's the thing that's what you just mentioned, those businesses. This is the dirty little secret, is I can go right now, I can, like next to Steve's building, I can say, hey, city, I'm going to come and tear this building down and build a new one. But to do that, I need a property tax abatement, and I'm going to have a payroll tax abatement for 10 years. Right. So meanwhile, I build this monstrosity building next to Steve. I don't pay any property tax. I don't pay any income tax.
Right.
And Steve's building now is worth more. So Steve has to pay full boat. So
Dude,
now I've got an uncompetitive advantage. This is what Intel does. This is what Honda. They come in,
right.
They get it all. They don't pay any taxes for quite a long time. We're hiring people. That's great, but they're contributing nothing to the tax base.
Well,
but they are providing jobs, so we build the economy.
Now you sound like me.
And it's like
so.
I'm
out there in Intel land.
So
I'm well aware. My real estate taxes went from $4,000 a year to $8,000 in 1 year.
You will pay.
Okay.
And that's because all of a sudden, supposedly, my little farmlet is now worth double, right? And it's only because this little hot spot in the real estate market, all of a sudden, like the auditor and the recorder and the county commissioners say, oh, we can't do anything. Yeah, you can go to the legislature and basically say, for people who are there in the first place, like your little old lady widowers,
kind of a farmstead feel to it.
They cannot pay their real estate tax.
And it's not like they can just put a sale sign and go somewhere.
Exactly.
Like these people they've been there their entire lives.
That's right.
So like in your scenario, Glenn, somebody puts property right next to mine, and all of a sudden I have a bottom line on this building, and it's found its level. And then all of a sudden the government says, wow, your property values have gone up because Glenn built this building next door.
Right.
So now you got to pay $10,000 more a year. Like I can't do it.
Right.
So that means I sell.
So here's the point that we're basically saying, and this is the complaint about the average person, is that I just need it to be equitable across the board. Everybody's paying the same rate, value, and it's got to be capped because the average person cannot keep up.
Well, look,
with the megacorp.
It is somewhat, but here's the problem. All these special interest political agendas, right, whether on either side of the fence, once they put their finger on the scale one way or another, like giving you a little bit of an advantage because they think, we need to infill the city with housing. So what we're going to do is we're going to subsidize commercial developers to come in and put new buildings up. So I know right now there's a grant available. If somebody wanted to buy this building, take it down to the dirt and build apartments, they could do it, and they would get a grant from the city or the state, I forget which.
Well, we talked about that in one of our shows, that the state of Ohio has this financing program.
Yeah. So, well, that's free. So
that's right.
They get the demo permits, they get it all for free. All that stuff, they get to procure the asset and do it all for free because there's a, quote, grant. The problem now is the property values go up next door. They got to pay the tax, and that's what you're saying, Glenn. And it's like,
maybe it's a little old lady on fixed income, like Social Security,
or a small business that's run.
She can't pay the tax.
So it's equitable as it is, but as soon as the government tips the scale, as soon as they put their finger on the scale to promote some agenda, that's when it goes haywire.
So Intel? The only reason they're coming to Ohio is because of the CHIPS Act. And they actually said in their press release last week that they were slowing construction down because the CHIPS Act money for the forthcoming fiscal year hasn't been approved yet and given to them. So they are literally they're on the government teat, literally waiting for their construction schedule to get more tax dollars. And so the government's picking winners and losers here.
Meanwhile, I can't build my house because every concrete truck in Central Ohio is going to Intel. So now I got to pay more for my house, and that's not even in the same county.
Well, and you think of the logic of that saying. So you're holding back a year because you're not getting governmental money. So what does that mean that you think of the future for
exactly
for your business?
Exactly right.
So there's no future. unless you wait for another year.
Right.
Why don't you just plow right ahead? Because then you can get making those chips.
Excellent point.
And get going.
If free money's better than earned money, remember.
I know.
Yeah.
But
That's exactly right.
if it made business sense, investors would be supplying the money
get
that
it
the
done
CHIPS
now.
Act. Right. They would say,
exactly.
oh, wow, Taiwan might get taken over by China. So all of a sudden there'll be a need for more chips made for our national security in a domestically safe location.
So look, where do we stand on this then? So there are some restrictions Trump was trying to do this too, right? There are some restrictions that you could put on sending businesses offshore. You could maybe try to regulate it that way, and then the incentive would happen a little bit more naturally for businesses, for the chip companies to just build them right here in the United States somewhere, and then they would at least have to choose the best place for them.
That's right.
Right.
So, and remember that the key thing that Trump was trying to do was trying to people really want is a level playing field.
That's right.
We want to have the same rules. If I've got to run a business and I've got OSHA, the EPA, workers' comp, unemployment, all the different special interest property tax, and I got to play by these rules, and another company in another country has none of those rules, well, they're obviously going to be able to make it cheaper than I can.
Right.
I can't compete
We're gonna
up.
offshore it all.
The only way I can compete with that is if somebody says, you know what, Glenn, you can build this product for $100 and sell it for $150. This company's going to sell it for $150, but it only costs them $50 to make. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a tariff on that that particular business or country, so you're at least on a level competitive rate.
Exactly.
Everybody blew Trump up for that, and it's like, because that hurt their shipping because they're shipping from overseas.
Right.
Well, listen, buddy,
You have
it's
to
bigger
endure
than
that.
you. It's bigger than you. This is not
we blew it up
you
for,
or me.
This goes
thing.
all the way back to
That's right.
to NAFTA, right? I mean, this is
Correct.
like these are some of these
blew
issues.
up NAFTA, right?
So this is like we now have people have just gotten so accustomed to going having their stuff made in China because it's so cheap. But if you tariffed it, there's growing pains. It's going to take a decade probably before the field is leveled. But then the problem is a new president comes in and gets rid of it all, and it's like it never gets anywhere.
For me, I just want to open up. I just want to buy a product that I can actually open up the frickin' packaging
without scissors.
So if it's made here, I feel like it's going to be like in a bulk, and I can just grab it and go with it. But it comes from somewhere else. I can't open it.
So
it's impossible.
It's
just a little thing.
Let me tell you a little story about professional hand tools for like mechanics. Okay. So, big names used to be Stanley, Craftsman, Mac, Snap-on,
Matco.
Milwaukee.
Exactly. Milwaukee, right. Yeah. Crescent. So in comes this chain, Harbor Freight, right? And they're selling sockets and wrenches for $1, right?
Yeah.
And Craftsman's $15, right? So all your
but they say Pittsburgh.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So all your good old boys go. They start buying at Harbor Freight. So now Craftsman is just a brand name, right?
Yeah.
And if you talk to a dealership mechanic, the guys that have $30,000 roll around chests, yet with all these gleaming tools. Their Snap-on man, when he brings them a $250 wrench that used to be made in Chicago, it's now made in China, and it still says Snap-on on it. And so what has happened is you go into Harbor Freight. Those sockets and wrenches aren't $1 anymore. Now they're $19.99 or whatever. So China did this big loss leader in just this one industry, and it's happening to hundreds of industries. They do a loss leader for 10, 20 years. Right? They crash the competition. So Craftsman's gone.
And then they raise the rates.
And then they raise the price. And now they're just raking.
Because they got slave labor effectively.
Exactly.
Right.
But remember, too, like the blue collar or the hands-on working with tools was a necessity for everybody. You had to have tools to work on stuff. Today, only the professionals need it because nobody else knows how to run a tool. So you're going to go pay $2 for a cobalt wrench. It's a piece of crap. But for that one use, it's perfect and you can throw it away. The professional's going to go buy the good stuff because that'll last forever.
But it's made in China now.
They respect the tools that they buy.
Correct.
Exactly.
But the average person now doesn't need a quality tool because they only need
back in the day, and this is even in my teen years, like the prosumer would go buy Craftsman
because it's guaranteed forever.
Because it was guaranteed for it, it wasn't the Snap-on quality, and I don't know what the difference is,
still good
frankly.
stuff,
but
It was really good
But
stuff.
it was good stuff. Like I got a Craftsman set of tools from back in the 80s, and I
Yes.
still have them.
Right.
They're great. And
Right.
I've never broken a socket, and I'm not out there wrenching on them every day, but I've done my fair share.
Yeah.
And I still have them. And that was, and they were cheap. I mean, relatively.
They were reasonably priced, yes.
It was like, it was reasonably, you could go get yourself at Sears through the catalog a set of Craftsman tools, and it meant something. Now it's junk.
Yeah.
And
Or
if
at
you
least
broke
that's a perception.
if you broke that Craftsman tool, you take it back. As long as you can read Craftsman on it, they give you brand
They give
new
you,
one.
even if it were rusty. I've taken in rusty screwdrivers and handed it to them, and they gave me another one.
Right.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and even to the point, we all have tools from our dads.
Yep. Yeah.
And I love those. I mean, because you grab a tool that your father held.
Even a granddad.
Even a granddad, exactly.
different.
And they're no longer around, but you still feel them there.
Right.
They surge through you. You're getting that aura, like, okay, this is how Dad, this is how Grandpa
So how
would do
warped
it.
I am, Brett, I have my grandfather's hammer and screwdriver in a case with a little light to display it
There's
in my living room.
There's absolutely nothing warped about that.
Yeah.
Because I think we should channel that energy
'Cause
that we got from them.
He scratched his name,
It's
Charles
The hammer
Murdoch.
That's so cool.
with the leather,
Yeah.
leather
That's
rings.
so
Dremel
cool.
tools.
But we've lost that respect for the tools that we use.
Yeah.
It's all throwaway now.
Yeah. Well, we throw away our appliances. Like, if your dehumidifier goes out, people, nobody fixes it.
Right. And it's built that way, though, honestly.
I wish I could have a fridge in my house like the old one with the handle. You pull it open and it had the freezer unit in the middle. That thing would last forever.
Oh, yes.
You could turn the door
get
inside
inside
out.
that during a nuclear war and survive.
You turned it inside out.
Exactly.
You could put a whole keg in there plus your food,
Yeah.
and it would just run forever. Use no electricity.
Forever.
And now they just make stuff that you throw away in
You
a
throw it
year.
away. Like,
It's horrible, and they're $4,000.
They're crazy.
It's not
money.
even that they're cheap, right? You're
Exactly. It's a four-way.
Let's see some other Ohio things. So, do you guys remember this back in 2022? Remember that terrible case where the Uber Eats or whatever it was, the delivery lady with the little Honda, she had two kids in the back seat, and she went into a Donato's.
Oh, yeah, the kidnapping.
And then while she was in Donato's getting the food to run back out, she left her car running with two kids in it, right? Not.
They found them over in the Dayton airport or something.
They
right?
found one in the Dayton airport parking lot, just like outside. The other one they found, the two women actually did the police work, the two civilian women in Indianapolis. She took the other kid to Indianapolis and abandoned the car. So two women. So this is great. So anyway, the news item is that she was the perp. Let's see, her name is Genesia Brooks. Oh, excuse me, that's the wrong case. There's another case we can get into, but the mother. Oh, here it is. Nala Jackson, 25 years old, sentenced to 20 years. She pled guilty. Federal court, 2 counts of kidnapping.
She got 20?
She got 20.
20.
Yeah. So
That's a big number.
That's a
You
big
could have
number.
got her a better deal, Steve.
Probably.
Well, she pled guilty and whatever. So she's going.
20 is a big number.
But so that just happened. And then another terrible case, this one, a 5-year-old daughter. I don't know if you guys remember this, but up in Cleveland, there were 2 parents that were not being parents. They had 4 kids. One's the live-in boyfriend. The other's the bio mother. And they had a 5-year-old daughter die. At the time she died, her bones had quit growing. She was only 21 pounds at 5 years old, and her stomach ruptured. And they both got about 20 years also for her death.
Yeah, murder's one thing. Kidnapping's a big number. You see, the federal courts and state courts, there's a huge distinction
that was
on
state
the
court,
sentencing
right.
stuff.
Yeah.
But kidnapping is typically gets federal jurisdiction, and if they went to Indiana, then that's going to trigger some federal.
Yeah. And I think kidnapping anyway is federal.
I had not all kidnapping, but it can be.
Really?
Yeah, no. So you
Okay.
can have a state court kidnapping. I've had one kidnapping case in federal court. It was probably back in the late 90s. Some I don't remember what nation it was. Maybe I forget what it was, but some I guess an Arab nation of sorts the kids are here and the families are over there.
Yeah, right.
And
right. A custody deal.
So one of the kids kidnaps the others because somebody owes money back home.
Yeah.
And they took the guy to Indianapolis. And I did a federal prelim on that. It was crazy stuff.
Sounds
Did
like
they
a
pay
TV
for that?
Sounds like a TV movie.
Did they get the money for it?
No,
it didn't work?
There was a ransom demand, and the FBI got involved. They had helicopters chasing them over to Indiana. It was crazy stuff.
Oh my gosh!
Well, speaking of jails, another bit of Ohio news. The General Assembly is moving through a bill to spend $250 million on upgrading local jails, not Ohio prisons, but Ohio jails. And apparently we have 89 full-service jails in Ohio. There's 19,000 incarcerated in Ohio jails at any given time.
So we only have 89.
Full-service ones, as opposed to just like a lockup, but a full-service jail, like meals served, counselors.
Yeah, so there's a couple tri-county jails. There's a tri-county jail in London, Union, and maybe Champaign. There's another one down in Hocking.
Full service, I mean, like valet service and laundry.
Right.
Like it seems like it's probably like that.
That was a strange
service
term too. Yeah.
How much does it cost? How much does it cost to house an inmate?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer, but
probably I have no idea.
And then Ohio prisons, just by the way, population-wise, this is interesting. So jails house at any given time 19,000. Ohio's prisons have a population of right around 45,000. And now that's not Fed. That's Ohio prisons.
Do you have any 5 years ago numbers? I wonder if it's up or down.
I don't have that.
Be interesting to know.
It seems like a lot of people incarcerated. That seems like that costs a lot of money. There's the thing.
That's a lot of money, man.
We should just turn them all loose. I mean, save a lot of money.
They're trying.
Yeah, that's what I mean. This is the lunacy. They build the facilities, pay the people, and then let everybody out. It's crazy.
Yeah.
That's what Castro did, right? Yeah. One of those phases of the Cuban emigres was he emptied out his prisons.
Say hello to my little friend.
Go to Florida.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've driven downtown recently. Columbus, we'll go granular. There are outdoor bathrooms out now. Did you notice those little silver things?
No.
So it took millions of dollars and years of delay, but three permanent downtown bathrooms are finally set to open. They look like that.
Where are they at? Like
looks like
one on Long.
Looks like a space capsule.
Yeah, the little space because I didn't know what it was at first too because I drive by it.
I got to take
What would George Costanza say?
Yeah, we spent $2 million in pandemic relief funds on the project and hired the Capitol Crossroads Special Improvement District to administer. But it took years to do this.
To put how many out there?
Apparently, I've got one.
So the total, it took 1,005 days passed between the first allocation of money in May 2021 and today's grant.
To put a crapper up.
So that means the installation of the 3 bathrooms lasted longer than the construction of Nationwide Arena.
And how much did they cost?
Let's see, $2 million. So the
you know who's celebrating that fact? The Air Force, because nobody will be talking about the $880 toilet seats
exactly.
anymore.
So the installation lasted longer than the construction of Nationwide Arena, Huntington Park, or Lower.com Field.
Wow!
It's just
Columbus Metro Library's main
Steve,
branch renovations.
Is this a prank call?
The private sector, you could make one phone call, right?
Yeah.
And they put a porta potty like in an hour.
You could just contract somebody to run a porta potty business.
Exactly.
So the next thing's got to be the signage on that. You know where this is going. Who can use it at what time? Like you mentioned earlier in the show.
Right.
Okay, who's allowed in here?
Transgender bathrooms.
Oh, it's got to be. It's got to be. So it took longer than the creation of the giant gavel sculpture that we all know downtown. Christina Johnson's OSU presidency.
Well,
it took longer than that. And the combined pregnancies of Tyler and Elisa's kids, the reporter's kids. Anyway,
it turns out they didn't even need it because they just go right next to my dumpster out here.
Apparently, the dumpsters aren't good enough.
Does it at least have a heated toilet seat?
That it didn't say.
Well, for $2 million,
I tell you
I would
what,
hope so.
I'd love to see what the cleaning contract is.
We could do some research on it, I guess. I don't know how this. Yeah. It's got to be an elaborate porta john if you think about it.
There'll be people shagging.
Well, it's got to be tied to the septic system if it's permanent.
Probably.
There'll be people shagging in there. I mean, it's going to be a nightmare.
I can tell you this:
people will sleep in there
using it. Yeah. Never.
No.
I'm never going to use it.
It's going to have to be clean, Steve. Like, there's probably a schedule like on a porta potty. This was serviced and put a 5-star on it every day. I'm sure it's in there.
Yeah, there'll be homeless people that sleep in them.
That's
Oh,
I mean, in the middle of the winter,
Look,
just go in and sleep.
Yeah,
there's going to be wars.
Is there
Wi-Fi
Is
controlled?
there Wi-Fi in it? I mean, it's important for my private time.
Well,
Got to scroll a little.
exactly. I don't know the amenities. I guess we could do research run.
Is it a Faraday cage, like the lightning strikes? You're fine.
I don't know. I don't know. Or time limit that
now look,
zaps you.
Just we jest, but there was a time. Speaking of all these 88 counties in Ohio, that you could, and still in some counties they're still there. They've blocked the access, but you could go to the town square.
Yep.
And walk right up to the courthouse and go down the steps, and you'd be in the public bathroom.
Yeah.
And the water fountain and the public bathroom,
Yeah,
right in the old courthouse, all in the basement.
That's true.
You don't get to do that now, I don't think, right?
I have not seen one open. You can see how it used to work, but I've not seen one open.
You got to go through security,
forever.
right?
Now you got to go through security, and you can't get in. And most of the doors
They
are
won't
locked.
let you take a cell phone in.
Or they've remodeled them such that you can't even get in anymore.
Yeah.
Like Licking County's courthouse, you can't take your cell phone into the courthouse.
Unless you're special. You could get in if you got a law degree. You got to show your barcode.
I'd like, those old courthouses are great. They got the asbestos, the lead, just old school. You're
That
in a
is
good
old
spot.
school. Yeah,
and it's and they're just perfectly fine.
Justice.
And those bathrooms go to the floor urinal, not those little ones that's just hanging out. There's the whole thing.
It's like peeing on a wall.
Yeah,
right. I've always wondered why you could not. I've heard there's some kind of regulation that you can't put a urinal in your home.
Oh yeah, you can.
Can you?
Yeah. Or at least people do. I mean, I've
heard
looked at plenty of houses where there's
I think
that to me I would love.
I think it's the chick factor. I don't think chicks dig those in the house.
Well,
I think it's a natural law.
Therein lies the problem. Make some urinal that looks good.
Well, you could get this company that just did the permanent.
Yeah, exactly. They must have the knack for it.
It's a specialty.
Make it look like whatever.
Right.
Like an espresso machine.
We have over-regulated toilets. Isn't it the 1.5 gallon flush thing?
Yeah.
And people will bring in Mexican toilets to get the full flush in their big houses. Like there's an underground economy for big flush toilets.
But as you mentioned, Steve had to go through some upgrade for the bathrooms here in the studio.
Yeah.
And those are nice toilets.
Yeah.
They put on a show for you.
They do.
I went right into Home Depot, picked them up, installed them myself.
I can imagine they're pretty efficient.
It does a swirly thing. I want to know, would it work in Australia? Like,
goes opposite.
It goes the opposite.
Well, but the jets are already pointed a certain way out of the ceramic. So
now you're going against natural law.
Yeah, right. You take it to Australia.
It just drops. It doesn't do anything.
It might put the shit back into the water supply. I don't know. It might go backwards.
I was just listening to the comedy show, and Larry the Cable Guy was like, you send these toys now. As soon as you stand up, boom, it's gone. You don't even get to look and enjoy your work, right? You can't get a photo. You can't do anything. And now it's just gone. You're like, what just happened?
Robo poop.
Share with your buddies.
Like, did you see the size of that?
This is
scatological humor at 8 in the morning.
So we got tax season right around the corner. What's going on over there at Harper Plus?
Well, it's the greatest time of the year. It's like Christmas.
So the big deadlines people got coming up: March 15th.
March 15th corporate, April 15th personal. You can always extend till September and October if you want.
But you still got to pay.
Still got to pay. You can filing your taxes on the date. The initial April 15th, you can do that if you want, but you don't have to. You have until October 15th, but you always got to pay your taxes either quarterly, ratably, or by April 15th. If you end up owing at any time after that and you file, you will get a penalty and interest for that.
So isn't there a deadline for like K-1 form? I mean, aren't you supposed to get something by the end of January? I'm still getting crap in the middle of February.
So there's we'll call them the normal people that are not involved in businesses. They're supposed to get most of their things by the end of January.
Right.
Usually middle of February is when everything comes in. W-2s, 1099s. But K-1s from business returns, generally the accountants and the firms are, because everybody owns different companies all rolling up together, you have until September 15th to get those in. Because
really?
Wow. You know how hard it is to close out your own individual taxes. Now you do a business, and that business owns three other businesses. You got to wait for that first business to get done, and then they get done, then it rolls to the next group, then it goes to the next one. Then
so there's really no deadline for other than kind of a gentleman's agreement to the end of January?
No, the rule is for 1099s, W-2s, and things like that, you have to send those things out. But if you have a brokerage account, usually you have a little bit of time for those because, again, they're waiting for all these companies to roll things up. It is it is so hard to do all the reporting that has to happen by the, like
That makes
1099s. You have to close somebody's books out to send out 1099s to all their vendors. That's a big undertaking to close everything up by January 31st in the middle of tax season. But yeah, that's the big thing.
All right.
But always, get your extension filed so you don't get a penalty for not filing, because that's what the government really doesn't like. That's where you really get in trouble. But the paying, just write your check and pay it. If you overpay, great, you get it back. If you underpay, you're going to pay some penalty and interest. So generally, give them a little bit more just to make sure, because if you're in that situation you don't know, always overpay. You'll get it back. It's no big deal. You can roll it to next year if you're that kind of person. But
or you don't have to even guess by using you.
That would be an option that some would
Don't
want to
even
do.
guess.
You just kind of predict the future, know what
So
it's going to be.
in 20, 30 years, I've filed 2 extensions, I think. And they were both because I had to. One was going through some domestic relations issues, and the other was COVID issues. So
yeah, and it's there for a reason, because again, it creates an to try to do as a tax preparer all across the board. It's really hard. That's the equivalent would be as a doctor servicing people through a pandemic, and you have to see everybody in 2 months versus see them throughout the year. So it puts an unnatural burden on the client, the taxpayer, to try to get all this stuff together, and then you're trying to get your tax preparer to come in there and do what you have to do. So some clients, you can get them done. They're pretty straightforward. Other ones, there's a lot of moving parts. It extends the time, so it's not just an absolute anarchy movement to try to figure it out. You got some time to do it. You kind of know what you're going to owe, but the filing and putting it all together, file an extension is perfectly fine.
And then, it used to be, so people, I think, get a little bit intimidated because you got the Harper Plus thing, you got the consulting thing, you got all this stuff going on, but you got something else happening for the people who don't need all that going on right now?
Yeah, there's a gap right now in the industry it's very hard. 20 years ago, to do a personal return would take you, on a scale of 1 to 10, it would probably take you like a 2 or a 3 of effort and regulation and things you had to do. Today, that same client is going to be like a 7. There's that much more work to be done. The perception of what the accountant, the CPA, the tax preparer does and how much it should cost is not the reality of what it really is today. It just takes more effort to do things. And so the client that just needs the task of doing a tax return, nobody wants to do the task as a professional, because you can't make money on that, because you're trying to give advice at the same time, and you're tasking your highest level people doing a menial task, because it's not that hard. It's just a process you go through. So your only choices are to go to an H&R Block or Liberty or whatever like that, and you're not really getting some of this working 3 months a year, and you don't see them the rest of the year, and their fees are what they are. So there's a need to have CPAs, EAs do the work that's there all year, gives great service.
What's an EA?
Enrolled agent.
Okay.
And you can practice in front of the IRS, and you have a little more thing than just an average guy hanging up their shingle. You got to do some accreditation to do this. So we started another firm that basically, Pure Tax, that basically says, hey, the basic tax return, you're going to have somebody do it, but there's really no advice, because you don't need advice. You just need your return done, but you want something better than an H&R Block, but there's really not anybody else out there that's going to do that mid-range thing.
And it's called, you've created a business called
Pure Tax.
Pure Tax.
Pure Tax. So that's just a sideline where we evaluate a client. They just need a tax return done, because a lot of people do, and nobody wants to go to an H&R Block because there's no relationship there. Somebody took a 12-week class, they're doing your tax return, they're not there all year, and they do a fine job on what they do, but it's not what people want at that next level up. So put them into Pure Tax. But if somebody needs the advice and they need some planning, and they have questions, and they get these K-1s, and I got married filing separate, and what do I do about my dependent care benefits, and should I get a nanny or not? That becomes more an advisory client, and that goes on the Harper CPA Plus side, where they need the relationship for the advice on that, and then when you do the planning, and then it's a more robust fee because you're getting more value for that. But the general population, they do not understand in the industry, they have not trained their clients and the people that it's really hard to do what we do. There's a lot of regulation, and people just think it's the same every year, and it's just not. So that's really the push now, is to kind of educate clients more of what this means to file a tax return or to predict your results, because you have things that you can kind of maneuver and make choices that give you better results.
Well, cool. Yeah. Norm, any other nuggets you want to hit before we kill it?
Well, I mean, I think we should spend some time down the road talking about some of the crazy national court cases. We had this, just to preview future shows, guys. We had this lady who was high on marijuana, stabbed her boyfriend 108 times, no jail time, 2 years of probation, 100 hours of service. And it's a very unique finding that the judge made. So I think we need to talk about that. Need to talk about the E. Jean Carroll case, defamation case, $83 million. And, I just think that those are, with Steve being a defense attorney, I think those are future grist for the mill.
Yeah, we'll do some breakdown on that stuff. But that's for the future.
Yeah.
And those stories aren't going away. So we got plenty of time to get them covered. Well, Glenn, thanks for coming in today, man. This was most helpful.
Pleasure to be here. Yeah.
We, as everybody now knows across the globe, Harper Plus Accounting, and now Pure Tax, sponsoring Common Sense Ohio. You got to feel so special.
I don't know if I'm
Like
funny
hot
or funny weird. I don't know.
He's speechless.
Funny
Of
like
course
a
he
clown.
feels
Do I
fuzzy
amuse
and-
you? I don't know.
Feels fuzzy and warm. Of course.
It's the dream of everybody is to bring value, bring opportunity, and for what you guys are doing here, it's a pleasure to be part of something where you're just common sense.
Thanks,
How hard
Glenn.
can this be? Why don't people understand it? Who are the idiots making the rules, and why does everybody just go along with it? So it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. You know what? Before we close, we did have a heckler telling us we don't know anything about taxes. What was the issue, Norm?
Yeah,
I missed that.
he basically was trying to make some kind of a point that we didn't understand the difference between a deduction and a credit. And of course we did, and we do understand that, but he was flipping out. And,
Those are two different things,
Those are
but
two
they're,
completely
some are one is better than the other. Other ones you don't get, and other ones you do get. So it's a circumstantial thing. But yeah,
All right. Well, it's all
I'll talk to him. I'll teach him.
shaking his bony finger at us.
If you can catch him while he drives by. Exactly.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to wrap it up. Another riveting hour and change of Common Sense Ohio, where you can check us out at commonsenseohioshow.com, brought to you by the man himself, Harper Plus Accounting, Glenn Harper, where we are coming at you right from the middle each and every week, at least until now.